Hi, I'm Captain Mike. I'm back here with you with another video that was requested by one of my viewers, and Ron asked me that he said, how do you get fused glass large enough to make a knife blade, and about that size? And he says, you know, there's all kinds of videos online for fusing small pieces of glass that you can make an arrowhead out of it. Now, I'm assuming that everybody watching this knows what flint knapping is. Of course, there'll always be a few that doesn't, and that's okay. Flint knapping is the art of making arrowheads from stone or glass, and you can make it out of all kinds of materials. I won't bore you with specifics, but you can make all kinds of points and or, you know, knife blades. I make these knives, and it's called flint knapping. There's two kinds. There's percussion, where you take a piece of stone or glass and you hit it with a bone or another rock or some copper, and you hit it and flake off pieces, and that's called percussion. The other kind is where you take a blank or whatever, and you push it with a rod that has a piece of copper in it or a deer antler, and you push them and you flake it off, you pressure it off. Those are the two kinds. We're not going to get into that either, because that's another video. I just want to address how to do the fused glass so you won't make too terrible many mistakes. There's a couple of things that you're going to have to do this, and we'll get to that first. Let me swivel my camera, and the first thing you're going to need is one of those things right over there. You see that kiln, the blue box on it? Alright, you're going to need a kiln, and you're going to need one that has a computer controller on it. Not going to tell you you can't do it with an old-timey cone fire kiln, but you're just making things tough on yourself, and you're going to have a lot of failures. You're going to need the kiln. You're also going to need some kiln paper. I'll explain what that is and what it's for in just a little bit. And of course, glass. And so that's and some molds, maybe. Maybe you won't have to, but I'll explain to you what the molds are for. And I'm fixing to explain the most important thing right now, and that is types of glass. There are basically three types of glass. Actually, there's more, but you're going to be dealing with float glass, which includes bottle glass, which is wine bottles, beer bottles, clear bottles of all sorts, and window pane glass. And window pane glass, of course, comes in thin and thick, in about 3 different thicknesses. This is quarter here, and it comes in a couple of colors. It comes in clear, and it comes in some different colors of gray or bronze. And those are considered float glass. You can mix them most of the time. By mix them, I mean you can fuse them together, but not always, because they're different manufacturers. The other kind of two pieces of glass that you're going to bump into the most, so that's all we're going to address, is COE 90 glass, which is COE stands for coefficient of expansion. That's how fast the glass heats up and swells and shrinks when it cools down. And so there's COE 90, which is a lot of fusers use. And then there's COE 96, which these all come in different colors too. Just because I'm showing you blue and yellow doesn't mean anything, or blue and amber. But COE 96 is another one, and you have to make sure you've got either 96 or you have 90. Now, if you don't and you mix them, the glass is going to crack. These things are going to crack. Okay, you're destined for failure. There is one other kind of glass that I'm going to mention here, and because I have fallen into this trap many times, is I go to Hobby Lobby, and some Hobby Lobbies have a lot of glass, but it's for stained glass, and some stained glass will fuse great, some won't. Stay away from the Hobby Lobby glass. Don't even go there unless you just want to blow some money, and maybe you get lucky. I can tell you a whole lot of things that happen, but most of the time it just breaks all up. Had a bowl this morning that I tried it on. again, and it just busted in, almost ruined my mold. But anyway, another story for later. You're going to need float glass, CLE90 or CLE96 if you're going to have a successful fuse. Now it can be in, the glass can be in sheets, or it can be in chunks, or it can even be ground up into what we call frit, and you can fire it together. Now the simplest way to make these for pressure flaking, they're roughly 1/4 of an inch thick, is to take 2 to 3 pieces of this. 3 works out really good. If you just stack 3 pieces, you can put a piece of clear in the middle, whatever you want. It doesn't matter. Just put 3 pieces. This is 3 millimeters thick, roughly 1/8 of an inch. And I'll tell you something about glass. Glass kind of has a personality, you might say. It wants to be round, and it wants to be 1/4 of an inch thick. So if you heat it high enough and long enough, it's going to, don't care how much you stack up, it's going to be a round piece and 1/4 of an inch thick. Example, this little jewel right here, this little pendant. That's 2 pieces of glass, a piece of red, a piece of clear. They started life looking just like that. Put the clear on top, put it in the kiln and fire it, make pendants, and boom, she goes round every time. And what it does on this big stuff is when you put it in the kiln, it goes, if you stack 3 pieces, it's going to go to 1/4 of an inch or slightly more, and it's going to start to round off on the edges. Okay? I would imagine theoretically if you cooked it long enough, the whole darn thing would turn into a big patty. I don't know, I haven't tried that, but this is where I go, and I don't really need to know the other stuff like that. Now, before we even start the fusing deal, if you just want to make arrowheads, you want to practice, and you don't have kilns, listen, don't fret. Go find you a glass dealer. They'll give you all the stuff you want usually. They throw it into the dipsty dumpster. Just be careful and use gloves when you get it. It makes wonderful arrowheads. I mean, I have made just a gazillion of them. It works great if you want to flake across a great big wide piece. Yep, you can do it. And, you know, you just have a ball. No fusing required there. But let's get on to the fusing, because that's what Ron wants to see, and I'm gonna tell him what little I know on this. The easiest way to do this is to take your glass, 2 to 3 pieces, and a piece of shelf paper, this is nothing but a high-fire paper that's put together. The fibers are put together with a sugar emulsion of some sort, and when you put it in the kiln, the sugars burn away, and the paper keeps this from, the paper keeps your glass from sticking to your kiln shelf, which should be kiln washed to start with. But even with that, you want to have kiln paper. So that's what the kiln paper's for. So now you just lay this on the kiln, lay in there and fire it, and it's going to go to whatever shape you have here. The edges are going to start to round when it goes to full fuse, and it's going to try to be 1/4 of an inch thick. And you can manipulate it a little bit by, like I say, add 3 pieces, and you catch it just right, it'll be slightly more than 1/4, but the edges are going to start to round. They're all, if you notice, they're all round. Even this one, they're all almost perfectly 1/4, and because it was only 2 pieces. And you can put different types in the same kiln. I mean, you can fire 9096 and bottle glass all at the same time. You just can't fire them mixed. So let me make that clear. Once you have that done, you have to decide whether this is going to be sufficient, just laying them in your kiln, or you need something thicker. If you're going to do percussion, you're going to need a thicker piece of glass. There are people who can percussion this. I'm not one of them. Most people like to start with a thicker piece of glass. To do that, you're going to have to dam up the glass. You're going to have to force it to melt, but yet stay within the confines of a mold to get the thickness you want. And that's where I bring this thing in. This is an old one that I've had for a long time. It was given to me by some hot glass people, and it's got a crack in it, but it works fine. And what you do is you fill it full of frit, chunks of glass. It doesn't matter, whatever glass you have. You put your glass in it, wash it first. Your glass works better when it's washed. and put it in the kiln and fire it, and it'll all melt together. And you'll get some wild stuff. You know, it's never the same. And of course, you have to add white, clear to it sometimes. Sometimes you don't. It's an experiment. It's just a great experiment. But that gives you that puppy right there. Actually, this one right here is a little thicker too. Some people could do it. And those are the kinds of glass that you get. Now, on these right here, on this mold, see, I put just chunks of glass in here, but it's the same process. You want it to be maybe the size of this for some reason, the length of this, and you want it to be a little thicker. So you just pile different sizes of glass in there to get it where you want it. Infuse it. This has different colors of green in it, but it doesn't matter. It's just for the video. One other kind of glass, before I forget, that you can use, not infuse, but I can't help but mention it, I forgot to mention it when I mentioned the float, is Carrara glass. If you can find Carrara glass, it's a little bit more than 1/4 of an inch thick usually, and it comes from back when buildings used to have that tile front on them. Is all kinds of colors, but it makes a great knapping material. Just had to throw that in there before I forgot it, because I did forget it. So pretty much that's it. The only other thing you're going to need if you're going to make a knife blade and you're going to if you're going to pressure flake, I use patterns. And I'll start off by drawing me some patterns, okay, and get the patterns kind of the way I want them. Then I transfer them from that paper over to a piece of plastic with some carbon paper, and I just make all kinds of plastic patterns, different sizes, you know, whatever suits me. And then I take one of my patterns, and you'll put it on the blank wherever you want, and draw around it with a wax pencil. I use a wax pencil. You use whatever you want. And then you're going to have to do that particular procedure, you're really going to need to have a tile saw. I use a 10-inch tile saw with a diamond blade. Come from Harbor Freight. They're not expensive. They last for a long time, and you can rough it out. Once it is roughed out, I do have a diamond grinder that's got big round grinding blades on it, and it makes life a lot a lot easier. Because you can go ahead and you can grind an exact 90-degree angle on it. Makes it a lot easier to pressure flake, and you can just dress them up. This is an interesting piece here. This was made from some old marbles I had. This actually was the first piece that I fused, and it was just a bunch of marbles, no filler, and it just come out wonderful. Tickled to death with it. But that's it. These blades were napped by a friend of mine, Dave Sweatman. I furnished the glass. He furnished the flint napping on them, and this is a technique called flake over grind, and they're really beautiful. These are some that I made, and that was some beer bottles, I think, maybe I don't know what type, but green beer bottle. That was just some blue glass that I slapped together and fused, and that was some red, and it works great. It works great. I do mostly pressure flaking, and I do it from a pattern, and so it works good for me. And Ron, that's how I do it. If I have forgotten anything, which I probably have in my haste, you guys just put it in the comments below. Ask me the questions. If I can answer the questions for you, I will be more than glad to, or I'll do the research and try to find the answer for you. But it's really not difficult if you have a kiln or know someone who does have a kiln that will do this for you. Like I mentioned, just wine and beer bottles busted up will work great. You don't have to go get fancy glass. You're just limited to what colors you can use with float glass. So I reckon that's it. I hope I have not forgotten anything. Try to do my best to cover it all. So anyway, that's it. That's how I do it. I'm Captain Mike, and I'm out of here.